want to start with a Fox News alert tonight. President-elect Donald Trump getting ready for another rally. Tonight, it's in Wisconsin. You'll see it here live as soon as he starts. But as we wait, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. In the first weeks after Donald Trump's surprise election win, Democrats tried to make sense of the inexplicable, the unthinkable. How did this man become president? Was it racism? Was it sexism? A rogue FBI? An ungrateful middle class? The long-term effects of OxyContin? Well, none of those explanations answer the question adequately, and so a new culprit was found: theft. The election must have been stolen by Russian saboteurs. The country's editorial pages were in full Russian panic mode this morning. If anything, the electronic media were even more hysterical. This, for example, is how Keith Olbermann opened his internet show last night. We're not going to show you the pictures. We're just going to quote it. Buckle your seatbelts. Here it is. "We are at war with Russia, or perhaps more correctly, we have lost a war with Russia without a battle. We are no longer a sovereign nation. We are no longer a democracy. We are no longer a free people. We are the victims of a bloodless coup, so far a bloodless coup, engineered by Russia with at best the traitorous indifference of the Republican Party and Donald John Trump, a man who, to borrow a phrase from another December long ago, will live in infamy." Is that intense enough for you? Well, if anything, our next guest thinks that might be understated. Robert McElvain is a professor of history at Millsaps College, a columnist also at the Huffington Post, and he's been writing a lot about Russia in recent days, and he joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on.
So, glad to be with you.
I want to quote something you wrote just a couple days ago that I read in the Huffington Post. You say, and I'm quoting, "There is substantial evidence that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump." What is that evidence that they stole the election?
Well, first of all, I do not go beyond Keith Olbermann. In fact, a lot of that is certainly hyperbole. But when people say that whatever Russia did clearly didn't affect the election, that's ridiculous. We hardly ever hear mentioned in the media that Hillary Clinton won by 2.8 million votes in the real vote. The three states that put Trump over the top in the Electoral College was by a total of a little over 80,000 votes. And if anyone thinks that what the Russians were doing in terms of the emails that were released through WikiLeaks intended to damage Hillary, and they obviously did to a great extent, were not enough to get 80,000 votes moved in the direction of Trump away from Hillary, I don't know what they're thinking. Obviously, that was the case.
But hold on. I want to get back to what you wrote. You wrote something very specific. I'm going to read it to you again in case you don't remember writing it. "There is substantial evidence that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump." I'm not contesting it was a close election. I'm, of course, familiar with the numbers. How did Russia steal the election? Please be precise.
The way I just said, by doing things that were intended to help him and to hurt Hillary Clinton. I don't think initially that was what the Russians were expecting to happen. They thought, like almost everyone else, including Trump himself, that Hillary would win the election. They were trying to damage her, make it closer, make her weaker. But as it got closer to the end, they saw the possibility of him winning.
But hold on, I don't want to interrupt you, and I don't want to talk over each other, but you're saying, how would you know what the Russians think? Do you have special access to the thinking of Vladimir Putin? How would you know that? And again, for the third time, how did they steal the election? You said they stole the election, and I'm open-minded, but I want to know how they did that specifically.
Well, I think I've just told you twice, and I know you like to argue, but what I'm trying to get at here is the fact that the Russians are going to have enormous influence in a Trump administration, and this is not something that should only bother Democrats or liberals. It's an American issue. It's a patriotic issue.
Okay, but hold on. I'm sorry. You wrote. You're a college professor. You have a real job. You wrote on one of the biggest websites in the world, the Huffington Post, that they stole the election. Now I'm quoting, "The survival of the American Republic is at stake. We have only 10 days to save the Republic from a hostile takeover by billionaire oligarchs and their Russian backers." I want to know how this happened. How specifically did they influence the election? By releasing these emails? Do you have evidence that these emails swayed the election results? If so, what is that evidence? I mean, you made all these claims.
Are you seriously suggesting that the emails did not have an influence on the election? I mean, everyone knows that.
But how does everyone? I mean, everyone. Let's say
Trump would say they didn't. He's the one who kept telling the Russians to go ahead and release them.
Come on. You're making specific claims. You say they stole the election, and I'm not misquoting you. You wrote that like 3 days ago. And I'm asking you how, and you won't answer, and you're instead saying it was a very close election.
I have answered it repeatedly. What I would like to, instead of getting into an argument over that, would like to ask why everyone in the country is not seriously upset not only about the Russian intervention in the election, but the fact that the National Security Advisor is very close to Putin.
Okay,
the incoming Secretary of State is very close to Putin.
Look,
Mr. Trump
we're going to be
himself,
debating that for the rest of the show.
Continued to talk about Putin in the most glowing terms. This is crazy. I mean,
then let me ask you.
Can't imagine
I'm
if this
sorry.
was on the other in the other direction.
If it was on the other side,
what people like you would be saying. What you'd be saying if Hillary Clinton had been helped by the Russians and
I don't want to keep talking over you.
Russian favorable people into the government.
Okay. I have to say, I would ask the exact same question, which is, if you're going to claim that a foreign government influenced the outcome of elections in this country, be very specific about how they did it. Do you think they altered the count from the voting machines? Do you think a specific piece of propaganda? Okay. Then
there is no evidence of that.
Okay, then tell me your evidence.
I told you repeatedly what they did. What we know they did was to put out the emails.
Please just hear my question.
And incidentally, if you let me talk for just a moment, if you let me talk for just a moment, it's interesting that Mr. Trump focused in on the claim that was in one of the news stories over the weekend that the RNC was also hacked and insisted that wasn't true. Well, let's think about why he would want to insist that.
Okay,
because if in fact the RNC was
you know
hacked
what?
and they didn't put anything out.
I have you on to offer evidence to support something that you wrote, and I'm giving you airtime in front of a lot of people.
And I have offered you the evidence
no, you
of that. What I would like to do is talk about why you and every other American should be concerned about an American government beholden to Vladimir Putin.
I'm concerned enough to have you on, and you are literally the last guest I'm going to ask this of, because I've asked it for the last 5 days. Not one person has answered. Name one email or one piece of information that was false that got into the media bloodstream in America that you think was sufficient to influence the election for Donald Trump. Just name one.
Did I say that they were false? No, I didn't say they were false.
Then name a real one and show some evidence that it influenced voter behavior.
For the express purpose of helping Trump.
But name one piece of information from WikiLeaks that you can show influenced voter behavior on a scale sufficient to pull the election for Trump. You can't.
Remember, we just talked about a moment ago a scale sufficient. If you look at the total vote, the number of votes that gave Trump a lead in the electoral college,
I'm going to stop you there. You were saying irresponsible things that are misleading people, and I think it's wrong.
The entire electorate.
Robert, I'm cutting you off because I gave you a chance, and you refused to be real with me, and I'm sorry about that. Thanks for joining us.
I'm sorry.
President-elect Trump's thank you tour stops in West Allis, Wisconsin tonight. It's going to begin, and we're going to take it. Right now, we're going to go to senior national correspondent John Roberts, who is live inside the arena right now. John?
Tucker, good evening to you. They're just warming up the crowd here in West Allis, and though it's only 5 degrees outside, the crowd inside is very hot tonight. Donald Trump just landed, so he should be here on time, scheduled for an 8 o'clock Eastern start. Got some news to pass along to you. According to 4 now sources inside the transition, Ryan Zinke, the congressman from Montana, is Donald Trump's pick for the Interior Secretary. Of course, he has a long military career. He was a member of SEAL Team 6. He held the rank of commander. We also have learned that Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, will get the nod as the Energy Secretary. Neither one of those announcements, at the moment at least, is imminent, but who knows? Donald Trump could get up on stage here and announce them tonight. That's the thing about this, unpredictability. Now, in terms of his pick for Secretary of State, which was announced, Rex Tillerson, who is the CEO and president of ExxonMobil, getting some headwinds on Capitol Hill, even from some Republicans like Marco Rubio, who said he has, quote, serious concerns about Tillerson's nomination, saying, quote, the next Secretary of State must be someone who views the world with moral clarity, is free of potential conflicts of interest, has a clear sense of America's interests, and will be a forceful advocate for America's foreign policy goals to the president. Contrast that with what the former Secretary of State in the Bush administration, Condoleezza Rice, said today, quote, he will bring to the post remarkable and broad international experience, a deep understanding of the global economy, and a belief in America's special role in the world. And Robert Gates, who was the Secretary of Defense under both the Bush and Obama administration, say, quote, he is a person of great integrity whose only goal in office would be to protect and advance the interests of the United States. Now, of course, keep in mind that Gates and Rice are partners in Rice Hadley Gates Consulting, and ExxonMobil is a client of theirs, full disclosure. But also former Secretary of State James Baker said glowing things about Tillerson, as did the former Vice President Dick Cheney. So while there may be some scrutiny on Capitol Hill, the Trump transition is pretty confident they'll be able to get Tillerson confirmed. Now, that press conference that was supposed to happen on Thursday, where Donald Trump was going to reveal to the world how he was going to separate himself from his business interests, that is not going to be delayed until the beginning of January. Transition officials told me that they just bit off more than they could chew with trying to fill out all of these cabinet positions and some of these others. So they're delaying it. Reince Priebus basically said, give us time, we'll get it done. Listen to this.
What President-elect Trump is doing with a lot of lawyers and a lot of people involved is just making sure that all government ethics are followed, that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and he's going to make sure that nothing is compromised. And so that's all this is, and it's just going to take a little time, but we're going to get it right.
Now, delaying this press conference, though, does give Donald Trump, Tucker, an advantage on two fronts. First of all, it gives him more time to get all of his affairs in order, lay that plan out at the beginning of January. Plus, there's a very important date coming up next week, December the 19th. That's when the electors get together and they vote for who is going to be president. And if Donald Trump gets his over 270, gets his 306 or whatever, he will basically just roll on to the inauguration. But there is a move afoot to try to get some of those electors to vote against Donald Trump. And if he doesn't have to answer a lot of difficult questions about some controversial issues at a press conference before the electors, there's probably an advantage to him there, Tucker.
Super interesting. Thanks a lot, John. Appreciate it. Well, earlier this morning, as John just noted, President-elect Trump announced he's nominating longtime Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson to be his Secretary of State. Nominating someone with no government experience to be the nation's top diplomat offended many in Washington, a city where government experience is valued for its own sake and considered far more important than, say, succeeding at something or being wise or impressive. Now from Trump Tower, Kellyanne Fitzpatrick, Trump's senior transition advisor. Kellyanne, thanks a lot. Kellyanne Conway, I'm so sorry. Thanks a lot for joining us, Kellyanne.
15 years I've been married, Tucker, but that means we go way back. That's all right, darling.
It does. It's great to see you. So I want to ask you before anything, you just heard John say something you already know, which is that Congressman Ryan Zinke will be the Interior Secretary. It was announced in the press anyway 4 days ago that Cathy McMorris Rodgers, the Congresswoman, was going to get that job. People were lining up to replace her. The transition didn't back down those reports. What happened?
Well, today the president-elect offered the spot to Congressman Zinke. It was a very competitive process, had wonderful candidates. So yesterday, Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers came back to the Tower. She's the highest-ranking woman in the Congress, has given birth 3 times in Congress, a record. You also had Congressman Raul Labrador. There were other people who interviewed for the position. But this is a decision that the president-elect and the vice president-elect make as they form their cabinet. Sometimes you have many talented people vying for one particular spot, and that was the case here.
So what was today, obviously, the story that got the most press was Kanye West showing up. I'm sure you've been talking about it all day. What was that about?
Well, I was glad he's gone blonde because we have more fun, apparently. But no, listen, Kanye West, as I understand it, had called Mr. Trump or called his office and requested a meeting. The meeting was brief, but it was spirited. I know they both enjoyed it. They came down to Trump Tower afterwards to the lobby and took a picture and maybe made a brief comment. And Mr. West and the president-elect have known each other for a while. I know Kanye West very recently said he did not vote in this election, but had he voted, his vote would have been for Donald Trump. I know that shocks the conscience of many people who say they're free thinkers, Tucker, but like to tell everybody how they should vote, especially if they're in music or they're of a certain race or a certain money caste, if you will. But they had a good conversation. I mean, Donald Trump meets with many people in a given day, and today was no different. I think between yesterday and today, it was just a whirlwind of activity here in Trump Tower. He and the Vice President-elect Mike Pence have met with probably 90 men and women outside of performers who, will give advice and counsel for this next government, who all love America, and not most of whom won't be in the cabinet.
So I assume that all of this is taking place in public right on Fifth Avenue. Obviously, the president-elect could call any of these people, but he's having them in. So each one sends a message that the rest of us can kind of decode or interpret. And so today you had Omarosa, Kanye West, Bill Gates, Senator Santorum, Wilbur Ross, Mark Burnett. It's like a Vanity Fair Oscar party. What's the message that meeting with this diverse a group of people sends, or that you seek to send with meetings like this?
Well, this is Donald Trump. He's a man who's lived a very full life, has many friends and colleagues across many different industries. Before he became president of the United States, Tucker, he was already the biggest man in the room. Large-in-life personality, wildly successful, brilliant businessman, and someone who has been able to cross-pollinate across many different industries and create many different friendships. Yesterday also and today he had Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia. He had the aforementioned members of Congress. We also had Obviously, there were other senators and governors who stopped by.
Right.
Governor Perry stopped by and is now the Secretary of Energy nominee. So it'd be one thing to just be hosting people and having a showcase of men and women, but that's not what this is. He's actually forming his cabinet, a tremendously conservative and sharp cabinet of qualified, capable men and women from diverse backgrounds. He's doing that in record time, which is a very Donald Trump thing, right? When he opened up the old post office last month, he called it, or 2 months ago, he called it on budget, under budget, and on schedule. That's also the way we look at his cabinet selections, which are, really taking some people by surprise. How differently he's looked at some of these positions, like the Secretary of State position, fourth highest ranking individual in our nation's government. Rex Tillerson is a very Trumpian pick. The president-elect told me just today that when he met Rex Tillerson, they clicked immediately. I'm not surprised. They're both very successful, accomplished people who employ tens of thousands of individuals, and that he just felt he was in a very special league, somebody who can negotiate deals, somebody who already has relationships across the globe, and somebody, frankly, who's told Vladimir Putin no.
So Senator Manchin was in the running, apparently, or he was in the running, for Energy Secretary, and you just said that has absolutely gone to Governor Perry. What would Mr. Trump be talking to Senator Manchin about? What position?
Well, Senator Manchin has been very helpful and welcoming to President-elect Trump since he took office. I think since he was elected 5 weeks ago tonight, who's counting, that he's not in the Democratic orthodoxy, as we know, Tucker. Senator Manchin is somebody who votes his conscience, is willing to break ranks with his party when he believes it is the right thing to do and the right thing to do for the people of West Virginia, to whom he is beholden. And we think we can rely upon him as a critical vote for some of these common sense reforms that the president-elect has said he will put forward in the first 100 days. Hopefully we can rely upon him for infrastructure, for tax reform, for repealing and replacing Obamacare, so that people in West Virginia and all across the country can buy their health care across state lines the way they buy their auto insurance and many other goods and services.
I bet you'll be able to. Kellyanne Conway, great to see you. Thanks.
Thank you, Tucker. Congratulations on the show.
Thanks a lot. And now it's time for Twitter Storm, our nightly forecast of social media's most intense weather patterns. Tonight, a shower of snark raining down on Vox.com, and none too soon. After a review of the new Star Wars movie, Vox tweeted this link to the piece with the following headline: Rogue is one of the first Star Wars movies to acknowledge the whole franchise is about, drumroll please, war. This was something others on Twitter had noticed before. Starting with, roll 'em please. First up, Richard Arnold wrote, if you look carefully, Wars is in the title. Allo Conson tweeted this: the franchise isn't called Star Negotiations, geniuses. Deplorable BW wrote, you guys ought to have said spoiler alert first. Next you will claim it was all set among the stars. Boy, that would rock your world. And finally, Seth Maskett tweeted this: Season 5, Episode 11 of The Great Brady Bunch was the first episode to acknowledge the series was about the Bradys. And that's tonight's Twitter Storm from a very sarcastic place. Up next, many on the left are calling for a new Cold War with Russia. We'll talk to one Democratic consultant about whether that's a wise idea. Next. Also, Donald Trump's speaking tour continues tonight in Wisconsin. His plane has landed. We're waiting for the president-elect to take the stage in just a short time. Is there a new Cold War underway? Another Red Scare? Massive outcry today over reports of Russian interference in the presidential election. Even Twitter comedians are getting involved. Author and political scientist Ian Bremmer tweeted this picture with the caption, someone's practicing for the next U.S.-Russia summit. Presumably, President-elect Trump would be in the dog position there. Chuck Rocco joins us now. He's a longtime Democratic consultant and advisor of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Chuck, it's great to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm hardly a suck-up to Russia. I've never been pro-Russia.
Right.
But when people are saying, adults too, not just crazy people on Twitter, adults are saying Russia stole the election from Hillary Clinton, I think it's fair to ask, how exactly did they do that? I'm open-minded. Do you have any idea how they did that?
I was thinking, I saw your segment earlier, and I think that they did have a role. I honestly feel that way, and I do have an answer for your first question. One of the roles, I think, was when the WikiLeaks put out the emails. And for somebody like me who supported Bernie Sanders, I got to see behind the curtain of things that I assumed were going on at the DNC.
These were the DNC emails, the first tranche.
Right, absolutely. Okay. And so then it confirmed that. And I think that it affected enough votes to maybe they stayed home and didn't vote for her. Let's set that to the side. I think that could have affected the election. But like you said, I don't have any facts. I just assume that as a consultant and a professional.
Okay.
But I think a lot of Democrats were rocked back on their heels after the election, right? And they're angry, A. B, they have a good enemy there in Russia. Like you said, who is pro-Russia? Who is pro a country that has no democracy? And so they can tie that together and go, look at Trump. Look at what he did. Look at who he's friends with. And we just got lost. And there's the boogeyman. We've told you all along.
I think that's right, except the problem is there are real-world consequences for taking that posture toward an actual country, which plays a key role in, say, Europe, and is one of the world's largest energy producers. It's not like beating up on Burkina Faso or Chad. I mean, this is an actual place that has played a pivotal role in world events for centuries. And so to say our whole policy toward this country is going to be guided by our anger over the election seems a little nuts and irresponsible.
Absolutely. And I also think that when the CIA came out and said that they had proof that there were some kind of interaction there, I think that gave them the ammo to go, look, something is going on, and they can pivot like all politicians do, or consultants or operatives, and say, look, it is the bad guys. They can say our democracy is pure and whole as it should be. We should have free and fair elections. Nobody would argue that. But then you can actually say our CIA, somebody can say that Russia had a role in trying to hack something to influence the election. But where the proof will come out in the pudding is when the facts are presented absolutely, right?
But now is the time to at least speculate with precision. Right. Okay, they stole the election. How did they do that? I've asked that question night after night. I can't get one person to get specific. And I'm starting to think maybe this is just a pathetic exercise in displacement. Rather than looking at their own shortcomings, maybe put up a bad candidate. Maybe it was a populist year, we ran an elitist. Maybe we didn't have an economic message. I mean, there are lots of explanations. They're ignoring all of that to blame Russia. It seems like textbook denial to me.
I, as a Democratic operative, have always blamed Russia as one of many spokes in the wheel to blame with everything that you listed. I think that the biggest influence that Russia had on the elections were the emails that reinforced a narrative that was already there, that if she would have been a stronger and better and more trustworthy candidate, wouldn't have affected her at all, and she would have won. I think that.
But would you concede that that narrative, as you put it, was also true? I mean, those emails were verbatim true.
Think about the Bernie guy who was sitting back watching my guy go out and support her and be stalwart in his support, somebody I had worked for 13 months, and always assumed that things would have been a little tilted towards us. We were fighting the establishment. We took all of that. We accepted all of that. But then to see that spelled out in emails, even though I still voted for her because I was very much not Trump, think about the thousands of grassroots supporters who have the same position as Donald Trump on trade, who got to see that exposed, which could have literally cost her the election because it was just 80,000 votes. And I can think of 80,000 young people in 3 states who could have been mad just about that one issue to maybe cost the election.
I just can't be mad, as much as I'm against hacking, and I don't think foreign governments ought to interfere in our country in any way.
Absolutely.
I just can't be mad about people making informed decisions when they vote, having more information. I'm just not losing sleep over that.
Right. I mean, I think that what I said, it reinforced a narrative.
Right, which was accurate.
I ran a primary against her, okay? I understand that piece, and we've got to be that
I can't believe you voted for her, Chuck. I don't believe you, by the way. I think you're just saying that.
It's a private decision.
It is a private, and you just made it a very public one. Chuck Rocha, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, a group of socialists has a plan for Inauguration Day. It's a big plan. We'll tell you what it is because we're going to talk to one of them next. And then President-elect Trump is about to speak as part of his ongoing thank you tour. You'll hear him as soon as he begins live on Fox. Stay tuned. Well, President-elect Trump is getting ready for tonight's rally in Wisconsin. You'll see it here live when he begins to speak. In the meantime, socialism is alive and well in the United States and getting more popular, according to polls. One group of socialist students are organizing a walkout on Election Day. The organizers, who call themselves Socialist Alternative, say this will send a message to President Trump. Joining us now is Elon Axelbank. He's a junior at Northeastern University and is on the Socialist Students Organizing Committee. Elon, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Tucker.
So the question, if you're a socialist, and by the way, I take your views seriously. I don't agree with them, but I don't think a lot of people agree with you. If you are a socialist and you care about working people, but you also hate Trump, how do you square the fact that the majority of private sector union members, the very people you exist to help and stand up for, voted for Trump?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the reality is a lot of people had to vote for Trump for him to get elected, and I don't question that. And, he's now the president of the United States of America, and we have to deal with that. But from our perspective in socialist students, we're calling for a national day of student walkouts on January 20th, on Inauguration Day, in order to send the strongest possible message starting on day one, that we reject his agenda of, attacks on women and not letting women, have the right to choose what to do with their body. His agenda of deporting millions of hard, working class immigrants, working people like you're talking about. His agenda of forcing Muslims, millions of peaceful, genuine Muslims to register in this registry so that the government can monitor him. And we reject his corporate agenda, which will actually hurt a lot of working class people and really the whole 99% as a whole. So what we're doing is calling for students to walk out of classes and join protests in their cities on January 20th to send that message and build, step one in the process of building a movement to resist Trump.
But I'm confused about the message. So if you're a socialist, you're primarily interested in changing our economic policy, and I read your website and you say that your young people who see the crisis of student debt, our declining living standards are entirely based on capitalism. It's a system that exploits the many for the benefit of a few. I get it. But again, back to my first question, a lot of people voted for Trump, but they were largely, overwhelmingly working class people, the very people you say you're here to represent and help. Have you thought at all about why that is?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, the dominant feature of this whole election, not just the general election, but going back, I mean, this election has been longer than I think a lot of us would have preferred it to be, about a year and a half. I think the dominant feature of this was a mood, an anti-establishment mood. People are upset with the way things are going, including myself, and certainly a lot of, working people, young people and students. And so I think people were looking for a change, and a lot of people voted for Trump because they thought, he was saying he was going to drain the swamp, change the system. He's talking about Washington insiders, right? He's talking about, the political establishment. And these are a lot of things that I agree with. I do think there's Washington insiders. But from my point of view, what we need is anti-corporate candidates, anti-racist candidates, anti-sexist candidates. They put forward not a message of division, but a message of unity based on the 99% opposing our common enemy, which, we in social students see as the 1%.
But wait a second. Who did the 1% support in this election? Who did every CEO, the entire tech community, all of finance, all of them were against Trump? And by the way, who's in favor of the mass immigration that you claim to support? It's businesses, because they want cheaper labor. They don't want immigrants to come in to make America more diverse. They want them to come in and work for cheap wages. Do you see the connection at all? And why you're abetting that?
Certainly a lot of corporate CEOs and whatnot endorsed Hillary, and this is because Hillary was a Wall Street friendly candidate. But that's actually not true what you're saying. I mean, if you look at Trump's appointments on the past 2 days, he just appointed the CEO of ExxonMobil, one of the most major gas companies in the country and actually the world too. That he just appointed him as Secretary of State. The CEO of Goldman Sachs is now on his cabinet. So what you're saying isn't totally true.
No, but here's what is true.
No, not really.
He has appointed a bunch of corporate people, for sure. But on the question of immigration, mass low-skilled, low-wage immigration, business is for that. You're for it, too. Why do you think they're for it? Because they want to see a more complicated tapestry? No. Because their labor costs decline when they import low-skilled people who will work for less, whom they can exploit.
Right. And that's why one of the key things that Socialist Students calls for is a $15 an hour minimum wage for all workers, because anybody who works, anybody who contributes to society deserves to have a living wage. So I don't accept this argument that if workers come from another country, that should allow corporations to drive down wages. The reality is that every single person who works, whether you're a student or a working person with a family, that you should have a living wage.
That's fine, and no one disagrees with that, but there is massive unemployment in the middle of the country, massive, and a higher rate for men than during the Great Depression. If you bring in more workers, will there be more or less employment? There will be less employment, more people competing for fewer jobs. This is basic economics. How can you as a socialist be for that?
What we need is jobs programs, and the reality is that appointing a CEO. The reality is that appointing a CEO of Goldman Sachs as our finance advisor, somebody who rejects the concept of the minimum wage.
Look, I'm taking you seriously, and you're just repeating dumb liberal talking points. Be a socialist. Be a radical. Open your mind. I'm serious. You're not a socialist. You're a lifestyle liberal who's upset about the same boring rich people topics. Look at the economics of it. And you know what I mean?
I'm looking at the economics. I feel like you're trying to get us distracted. The key message is that young people, you know, the majority of high schoolers couldn't even vote for Donald Trump because they weren't old enough. But Donald Trump's policies of deporting immigrants, making Muslims register, attacking women's rights, these things are going to affect high schoolers.
Those are
and
just
young
talking
people.
Points. You know what? The one thing about socialists is they're kind of interesting. Elon, open your mind. We're out of time, unfortunately. I'm being told we got to stop. But I appreciate your coming on. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, too.
Up next, BuzzFeed targeting Christians to create a culture of fear, some say. It's a trend. What's it about? Tammy Bruce here to explain next. Plus, President-elect Trump is expected to speak, as we told you, in Wisconsin. We're told that Speaker Paul Ryan and Governor Scott Walker will both join him on stage. We'll find out soon when they go live, and we will too. And here's something new, something that looks like voter fraud has benefited Democrats, and it's been uncovered in Michigan. According to the Detroit News, election officials found that voting machines in 37% of Detroit's districts reported more votes than the number of people who actually cast ballots, which, according to the laws of physics, is impossible. Those precincts were not part of a recent Michigan recount due to a state law that prohibits recounts in unbalanced precincts. Hillary Clinton garnered 95% of the vote in Detroit, while Donald Trump went on to win that traditionally blue state overall by a small margin. State government, which is run by Republicans, is now planning to audit the election results in Detroit. Sounds like they might want to. We'll continue to monitor that story as it develops. Well, up next, if you read BuzzFeed, you may have noticed a piece recently by Kate Arthur. She's a reporter there. And she wrote it about Chip and Joanna Gaines. They're the couple behind the popular HGTV show called Fixer Upper. The piece attacked them for their Christian faith, saying they were against gay marriage, or more precisely, their church is against same-sex marriage. The title of the piece, Chip and Joanna Gaines' Church, firmly against same-sex marriage. Well, radio show host Tammy Bruce has written a lot about this story, and she joins us now. Tammy, it's great to see you.
Hey,
I was a little confused when I saw this piece. I don't watch the show or the channel. I know that they're big in the HGTV world, but they didn't seem maybe public enough figures to attack in BuzzFeed. What is this about?
Look, I think that people say that you learn about individuals when they're successful. For the left in the last 8 years, we've learned that they're fascists, right? And I think that what we're seeing now after a decade of cultural success, I think the left is now looking for a new tact. And of course, we've always seen it, Christians are the target in general, as we've seen with bakers that won't bake cakes for weddings, etc. But now, since gay marriage is the law of the land and Americans generally are open to more of a fluid dynamic culturally, the left needs to find some other thing to argue. And in this case, I think it's a portend of something very difficult, in that they now want Christians to preemptively prove that they pay allegiance to conforming and to secular society. It's a new attack on Christians to let them know that effectively you are guilty until proven innocent. The great news is here, Tucker, is that this attack failed. And I think that the election itself was a message about our rejecting of political correctness and the culture of intimidation. This couple had support from across the board. Their premiere in the midst of this smear had a record-breaking premiere. And I think Americans are saying, look, no matter who we are, enough is enough with the culture of intimidation, enough with attacking individuals because of their faith, especially coming from the gay community. As a gay woman, I find it outrageous that we're attacking people simply because of who they are.
Well, yeah, and it also seems like part of the left's relentless politicizing of everything. I mean, my first thought was, I've got my views, you have yours, they have theirs. What does that have to do with their HGTV show? But I also thought, kind of selective, considering their views, whether you agree with them or not, are not exactly out of the mainstream for sincere religious people, and they're not just Christians. So I think most Muslim imams would have roughly the same views. Sharia law prohibits homosexuality itself.
Right.
But they would never go after an imam over this.
Well, look, even in this case, it wasn't even about them. It was about their church and their pastor. And here was an argument that they were somehow supposed to prove and answer an Inquisition's questions about who they are and what they stand for. The fact is, I only care about the choice she makes for the backsplash with the houses that she's updating. I don't care what they think. And as a gay person, as an American, it's about individual liberty, individual freedom, and that's what this election was about. And I hope that Americans are standing up against bullies, and in this case, that means we have to stand up against the American left.
Well, that website particularly, which is really dishonest deeply. Yeah. Tammy, thanks a lot. You explained that better than anyone I've heard. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Well, why was Kanye West at Trump Tower today meeting with the president-elect? Geraldo knows. Of course he does. And he'll tell you next. Plus, Donald Trump getting ready to step to the microphone in West Allis, Wisconsin. And we are on the scene, and we'll take it live when he arrives. Time now for the Friend Zone. We invite our pals from within the building here at Fox onto the show. Tonight we're joined by our old friend Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo, we've seen a ton of people going up and down the elevator at Trump Tower. The left is saying, oh, it's a right-wing cabal. And yet this morning, Kanye West shows up. Afterward, the two spoke to reporters. Watch this.
Just friends, and he's a good man. Doing well. Long time. We've been friends for a long time. Life. We discussed life.
Money in 2020. Do you think that's something you still want to do in life this meeting? Kanye, are you considering performing at the inauguration? Kanye, no comment about your meeting with the president-elect. This is the president-elect of the United States. Nothing to say?
I just wanted to take a picture right now.
Do you wish you were voting for him, Kanye?
And you take care of yourself. I'll see you soon. All right?
Tell me about the press conference that was rescheduled.
Now, I think Kanye West about 20 minutes out of the hospital. Yeah, what was that about?
Well, if the president-elect, Tucker, wants to project, kind of stability and sanity as this part of this transition, he picked the absolute worst person in public life in America. I mean, as you suggest, he just got out of the hospital for the psychiatric emergency that he invoked, so-called dehydration and exhaustion. He canceled his St. Pablo tour. So his life has been a mess. He had Kim, his wife, Kardashian, with that robbery in Paris. So many different crazy stuff has been going on in Kanye's life. I thought when I saw
wait, you're not against this. You couldn't be against this, could you?
Here's Trump. If Donald Trump wants to meet with Kanye West, that's great. I remember Kanye West
is
actually
outreach to an unserved community of rappers with psychiatric problems.
Right.
I mean, why is this bad?
In contrast to the billionaires in the cabinet, Kanye West a couple of months ago said he was $53 million in debt. So maybe that's the kind of antidote there. He wanted a counterbalance to all these.
But don't you think it's a little weird for the press to be jumping on? I mean, I actually think this is pretty strange, and I'm not, I don't know what it means. But I do know the press didn't say anything when Beyonce went to Camp David this past Labor Day, and the president's always sucking up to celebrities, and nobody ever says anything.
Well, I actually thought that maybe this is an indication that the president-elect is having trouble getting A-list performers at the inauguration. I mean, why would you have Kanye? Kanye is such a troubled person right now. It's serious. He was hospitalized. Of course, he's invoked the insurance policy to pay for the St. Pablo tour. There's tens of thousands of disappointed fans and vendors and coliseums that were booked and so forth and so on. And here he comes marching in with this entourage. There's so much about the Kardashians generally. I have nothing against them. I mean, Kanye, if you remember back in 2000...
You got to have something against the Kardashians. Come on.
In 2005, Kanye West actually had an impact on the second George W. Bush term when he said after Hurricane Katrina that George W. Bush doesn't care about black people. I mean, that was
so
George
unfair,
Bush caused it a disgusting moment. But Kanye did indicate this past spring, apparently, that he wasn't endorsing Trump, but he sort of supported him. And a couple of weeks ago, he said he's leading the Give Trump a Chance movement. I was actually already the co-chairman of that. Why he came and why the president-elect spent so much time on him, it's unusual. Listen, I hang out with unusual people.
Well, I know you do. I read your book. So I was looking for you in the building the other day, and one of your producers said he's gone. He's on his island or an island. Where were you?
Well, I had this dream years ago when I was a penniless kid struggling to get along that I would own someday my private island, a private island in the tropics. And 15 years ago or so, I bought one 3 miles off the south coast of Puerto Rico, and I love it. My wife doesn't like going there anymore because she's afraid it's too remote, and then you have Zika virus and the financial crisis and, this and that and the other thing. So I hang out there. I bring a lot of buddies. We go fishing, and this time I was with a guy who happens to be a shrink, a good friend of mine, Dr. Gonzalez. Not that I needed it, but it's a good
Wait,
guy
so
to hang
you
out, eat rice and
retreated,
beans.
so Trump gets elected and you go to a remote island with Zika virus and your shrink.
That's right. You could summarize it that way. Did you get the, and I give out holiday chocolates also, just to round out the Renaissance man picture, just rounding it all out.
You are that, for sure, and I ate your chocolates, I'm embarrassed to say. Geraldo, thanks a lot for coming on, and thank you for the chocolates.
All right, buddy.
Coming up, we are ready to take the criticism. You sent an awful lot of mean tweets to @TuckerCarlson. Some of them are kind of hilarious. A few are true. We'll read them next. Plus, as we told you, Trump in Wisconsin, live. Coming up. Stay tuned. Time now for our mailbag segment. We used to call it mean tweets, but, they're all this way. So we're just going to, no, just kidding. Actually, a lot of them are nice. Not all of them are nice, though. TN Black wrote this: listening to you say again and again, I'm not here to attack you, and then you do just that. Such a horrible journalist! Exclamation point. Exclamation points are big now. Tammy Jared tweeted this: I liked how Tucker tilted his head like my lab does when he's trying to understand what I'm saying. It's like a dog whistle. Only I can hear it. James Derek Dwyer wrote this: can you imagine taking Tucker Carlson seriously? You apparently can't. Odysseus tweets this: Tucker Carlson is what happens when you feed a spoiled brat nothing but rancid mayonnaise and creepy erotic Reagan fan fiction, which I have literally never seen in my life. Though if you have some, please send it. Finally, Ryan J. Navarro wrote this: don't take this personally, Tucker, but you're the absolute total worst person ever. Actually, I guess that is super personal. Yes, it is. We checked, and that is, in fact, super personal. Well, tomorrow it's your turn to be king for a day, one of the best segments ever. If you had absolute power and could do one thing to improve this country, what would it be? Tweet us @TuckerCarlson or email TuckerCarlsonTonight@FoxNews.com. That's it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 7 to this show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Don't forget to DVR us. Bill O'Reilly up next. He's going to have the Trump rally the minute it starts. Good night.